Well, but you know your part.
All right, so maybe just introduce the event and the poem maybe briefly to welcome our live stream viewers.
Okay. Brave and Startling Truth was written by Angelou. It's rather a long poem, but a really important poem. And I think that the poem will speak for itself. Let me just say that it speaks to the generation when she first wrote it. I think it was 2011. And it speaks even more clearly to the generation that we are part of today. We, this people, on a small and lonely planet, traveling through casual space, past aloof stars, across the way of indifferent suns, to a destination where all signs tell us it is possible and imperative that we learn a brave and startling truth. And when we come to it, to the day of peacemaking, when we release our fingers from fists of hostility and allow the pure air to cool our palms.
When we come to it, when the curtain falls on the minstrel show of hate, and faces suited with scorn are spread clean. In battlefields and coliseum, no longer rake our unique and particular sons and daughters up with the bruised and bloody grass to lie in identical plots on foreign soil. When the rapacious storming of the churches, the screaming racket in the temples have ceased, when the pennants are waving gaily, when the banners of the world tremble stoutly in good, clean breeze.
When we come to it, when we let the rifles fall from our shoulders and the children dress their dolls in flags of truce, when landmines of death have been removed and the aged can walk into evenings of peace, when religious ritual is not perfumed by the incense of burning flesh, and childhood dreams are not kicked awake by nightmares of abuse.
When we come to it, then we will confess that not the pyramids with their stones set in mysterious perfection, nor the gardens of Babylon hanging as eternal beauty in our collective memory, nor the Grand Canyon kindled into delicious color by western sunsets.
Nor the Danube flowing in its blue soul into Europe, not the sacred peace of the Mount Fuji stretching to the rising sun, neither Father Amazon nor Mother Mississippi who, without favor, nurture all creatures in its depths on the shores. These are not the only wonders of the world. When it comes to it, we, this people, on the minuscule and kithless globe, who reach daily for bombs and the blade and the dagger, yet who with petition in dark for tokens of peace, we, this people on the mote of matter, in whose mouths abide cankerous words, which challenge our very existence, yet out of those same mouths come songs of such exquisite sweetness that the word falters in its labor and the body is quiet in awe.
We, this people on this small and drifting planet, whose hands can strike with such abandon that in a twinkling life is sapped from the living. Yet those same hands can touch with such healing, irresistible tenderness that the haughty neck is happy to bow, and the proud back is glad to bend out of such chaos. Of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines.
When we come to it, we, this people on this radar floating body, created on this earth, of this earth, have the power to fashion for this earth a climate where every man and every woman can live freely without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the people, we are the miraculous, the wonder of this world. That is when and only when we come to it.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
And may it happen soon. May it happen in our lifetimes.
You're here.
Yep.
We all have a part in it.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Yep. I have to say, it's so hopeful. All these people in this room together, we can get there, right? We can come to it, at least closer all the time.
we're moving it right now.
That's right.
As we speak, it is forming.
We're always coming to it.
Carol?
We just wanted to open up for conversation about thoughts about Martin Luther King, Dr. King, and his thoughts and his words, and how maybe they affect your everyday life and how they've made an impact on you.
I think it's important that we recognize that Martin Luther King was not alone in this. He is our icon. He's somebody that we respect and look up to, but there were many, many people who made this a movement. And we too can make this a movement. We can continue this work. There's a lovely story that I love. So if you have listened to I Have the Dream speech, if you pay attention to it, there is, and this is all from PBS, so any of you fact checkers out there, I'm putting a disclaimer on it. So there's this wonderful piece in there that, so if you listen to the first like 12 minutes, it doesn't quite get its rhythm yet. And this is something that was interesting about Martin Luther King was that he spoke from the heart, right? He really and did it. He was well versed. But for the March on Washington, they said that he spent all night. He was so excited. He was so over prepared that when you listen to the first 12 minutes, you're like, it doesn't quite have that same ring to it. However, there was a point, and this is Mahia Jackson is credited with giving a little shout out to Martin Luther King about, tell him about the dream, Martin. Yeah. Now, this is kind of lore, but it's a very interesting part because at that 12-minute mark, you're going to hear him talk about his dream. And what's even more interesting is that there was a woman named Parathia Hall who back in this, like I said, this team, right? There was a group of people that were doing this movement. He had heard her speaking in a gathering in Georgia, and she spoke about having a dream, or not quite in those words, and she doesn't take credit for the words, but the idea. And in that idea formed, he talked to her about it and said, I love how she just fell in line with God at one point and said, I dreamt of this, I dreamt of this, I dreamt of this. And he said, I want to take that and use it. And then, wouldn't you know, tell him about the dream, Martin. And there we have it. This beautiful, awe-inspiring, unprepared sign from his heart that represented a movement that we are talking about today. So, again, PBS. But it was something, I hope that this incites some discussion or some commentary.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Patricia Lambert. I'm a very proud Hull resident of, I think, 4 years now. And before that, about 16 years in Washington, D.C. I was born in South Africa and brought up there. As a white South African, I benefited greatly from the apartheid system. One of my moments of awakening as an adult was when I finally got into a library at an institution of tertiary education that had a main library, and in addition to that, it had a private library. There were so many books banned by the apartheid regime because heaven knows nobody should be able to think or see examples of how other people live. When I finally found my way, built on trust of other human beings, to this very special library, I found a copy. I'm sorry. I found a copy of the letter from Birmingham jail. I was allowed to take it out with all sorts of security precautions, and I remember sitting in my office with the sunlight on the side of my head, reading
Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. As a white South African brought up in the apartheid regime, it was an array of light and an opening of my mind that I will live with, that I started living with then, and I have lived my whole life on that basis. I was extremely fortunate to be in South Africa as we transitioned, mostly peacefully, from the evil apartheid regime to a new dawn and a new democracy and a new way of living. And I always remember those things in tandem. The letter from Birmingham jail and the inauguration of President Nelson Mandela, who referred to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s words frequently. Thank
I have another connection. I wasn't really planning on saying anything, but since you mentioned PBS, and you mentioned the letter to from a Birmingham jail, which is up there, we have some excerpts. So I was born barely, but in the 70s, so I did not hear the speech live. But and I grew up in a family that was, very caring and read a lot, and I, honor my parents. I was very lucky to have that household. We were always told to treat people equally. I didn't hear overt words of hate. I'm very grateful for that. When I was a teenager, there was a PBS special, Eyes on the Prize. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Yep. And I was glued to the TV. That was when we only had 3 channels. But I was glued to it. Our school history kind of covered it, but it, really kind of glossed over it, right? It was a very short segment, and we learned sort of a happy, shiny version of it, and I didn't know much about the bus boycott or how long that was, and many of the horrors and the hard fight. And when it got to the segment on Martin Luther King's assassination and the interviews and people saying, everyone remembers where you were in that moment when you learned it. So I went to my parents and I said, what do you remember? I want to hear your story from that time. And my mother said, I don't really remember. I was raising my children. And my father said, I don't remember exactly. I was working, and he was a complex figure, not totally on board. And I had just watched this whole thing. I was, to this day, I'm still, I still wrestle with this. That's also a part of the story. And in the letter from a Birmingham jail, one of his main, he talks about a big concern, which is the white moderate who doesn't disagree, but doesn't necessarily act. And that's a potentially incredibly powerful voice, right? That if on the sideline is not choosing to be in the good work. So those two things really struck me, and I try. It can be easy to be in my position, to be comfortable and work and raise my children and, agree with good things and disagree with bad things. But that's not enough. Martin, he called me out. He calls me out every day. Where are you? And I'm also very grateful to, my husband and my kids, because I sort of said to myself, it's not enough for me just to work and raise children. Even while I'm doing that, I want to at least do something. And I'm so grateful that there are people in this town who had already done that work, that I can plug in, that are continuing it, so that when we read those words, that we feel more motivated and inspired, and not that shame I felt, honestly, as a teenager. And sometimes when I think about, what am I doing? Am I just leaving this to other people? It's on me too. So anyway.
I'm appreciative that we have this time to just pause and think about what we can do and what we should do. I do encourage everybody, it's hard to see from the very back, if you haven't looked at each of these slides that are scrolling through, there are some very important and inspirational quotes.
Last year we focused a lot, for those of you who were here for the first time, we focused a lot on the letter from Birmingham.
Yeah.
This year we want to change the focus a little, but keep including it because it's such an important backdrop to all of this.
It is. And I do want to thank everyone for bringing forth our mission, our theme for this year, which is Peace on Our Peninsula, building bridges of understanding. And that's the goal of, the goal and mission consistent with the No Place for Hate Committee, but also it's going to help us give directions on more of the things that we do throughout the whole year. I do want to point out, last year, and I think the year before, of course we asked everybody to make a donation to Wellspring here, to bring food for the food pantry, or to do whatever you can. And we called our event on Martin Luther King Day a day of service. Well, this year it's not just a day of service. We're hoping that people are going to pick up the ball here and make it a year of service. We did a little bit of research and have put together a table of some information which outlines all of the community service, well, I say all that we could find of the community service organizations in Hull. And we offer this material for anyone who's interested in getting involved, doing something. There's so much good work going on in town. There's so many great organizations, some of them more formal than others, but there's a lot. Anything that interests you. We encourage you to scan the QR code, which is on page 6 of this list. The QR code is right at the table behind you, and you can get a copy of the list of community service organizations that might interest you, that you could find the time for to do something during the year. It doesn't have to be something all year long, just one event. But on this, there are a couple of points we'd like to make. This information was largely taken from what we could find on the internet, from people's Facebook postings or people's websites. But there is the name of the organization, a brief description of what its mission is and what it does, and the kinds of things it gets involved in, and then there's contact information. So that if you do want to get involved, or if you do have more questions, you can contact people. And mostly it's by email, but there's some telephone numbers there too. Not every organization in town is on this list, because not every organization we feel is open to involvement from non-members. An example would be some of the organizations that are a part of the school system, the public school system. And so at that point, if you do want to pursue getting involved with those, you should contact someone that you know or someone in the superintendent's office to do that. But we hope this will be helpful, and we hope you'll find something that stimulates you to take another day at least, or maybe a couple more days, and get involved in community service. So thank you. Thank you.
On this next part here. Thank you, Pam. Pam put an enormous amount of work and research into putting that together. So I hope anyone who might be interested will take a look at the information that's been put together. You never assigned anybody to do this.
I'd like to take this minute to ask everybody to do a moment of silence in honor of Dr. King and this day.
And all those who have struggled and are struggling.
Thank you. So, in closing, does anybody have anything they want to add, anything that they feel that they want to share or talk about before we end?
Hi. Hi, I just want to say I've been here for like 76 years, so I've been here a long time. And but what I want to say is, although the town is not perfect, right from the very beginning, when the Anti-Defamation League asked people to support a No Place for Hate program, we were either the first or the second community in the state to step up and say yes. Our select persons, even though they're not perfect, certainly have always supported the committee and committed from the very beginning and agreed to take a pledge to honor our goals. And they do that every year. The new select board do that every year. And whenever we've asked them for anything, they're always on board to help us with anything we need. And I think we ought to be, grateful to them for doing that, even though, again, not all of us are thrilled with everything that they do, but that's okay. In general, whenever anything happens in town, the first thing they say is, just remember, people, we are a No Place for Hate community. It's the first thing they come up with and say, and do not support any activity that in fact violates that. So I think we ought to be grateful to that. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything you want to add? So in closing, I want to thank everyone for being here today, for taking the time out of your day, and especially in this awful weather, to come here and to share and to donate to Wellspring, a really great cause. And then I just wanted I picked out 3 of Dr. King's quotes that I found inspiring, but people can add if they like. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality, and the time is always right to do what is right. Anyone wants to add anything else? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I would just like to add, please stay, have a cup of coffee, some nibbles, there's plenty of stuff. We're here for a while, at least until 11:30 or so, until we need to start cleaning up, but thank you again for coming, and please check out punch yourselves.
Because it's growing.